Mohammed Atta war keen phantom, a war ein Mensch imite studium, wohnen und alltag, and er wurde zum führenden Kopf der 9/11 Kommandos. Dies geschieht seit, wie ein stiller, unauffälliger Mann zu einem zentralen Tiger wurde, Schritt für Schritt, Entscheidung für Entscheidung. Es geht Radikalisierung, Planning und Control, und die Frage, wie ein normaler Lebenslauf in ein tägliches Netzwerk ableiten kommt.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your source material and really extract the essential knowledge, giving you the context you need to be truly well-informed.
And today, we are taking on a very critical, and I think we have to say, a very sensitive mission.
We are. We're unpacking a detailed historical analysis that focuses on one of the central operational figures of the September 11th attacks, Mohammed Atta. Our sources, they lay out a narrative that is just... It's chilling because it's such a paradox.
Right.
We're tracking a life that transforms from an educated, polite student in Germany to becoming the lead operational terrorist, the first death pilot, and ultimately a mass murderer on 9/11.
And that's the core question, isn't it?
That is the central driving question from this material. How does that profound, terrible transformation even happen?
How do you live that double life?
Exactly. How do you maintain a functioning academic life while at the same time radicalizing to the point where you're commanding a world-altering act of violence?
So we need to look at that path step by step.
Yes, the specific organizational and, psychological events that this analysis chronicles for us.
And I think it's absolutely necessary we approach this strictly through the lens of the historical facts, the behavioral shifts that are provided in these sources.
Right. Our goal is clarity, not guesswork.
Exactly. Clarity, not conjecture. We need to dissect the path of radicalization, not just, fixate on the horrific end result.
And to really understand the organizational blind spots.
And the unexpected skills that turn this group of, student radicals into the chosen ones for this mission. We are analyzing the mechanics of that process for you without being, overwhelmed by the gravity of the events themselves.
Okay, let's unpack this journey. The sources start the narrative back in the early 1990s. This is where the stage is set for what we're calling the paradox of the Hamburg student.
Right. So Atta arrives in Hamburg in July 1992. He's 23 years old.
Oh, okay.
And the sources really stress that he came from a background of relative privilege. He's the son of a successful lawyer in Cairo.
So he's educated, middle class.
Very much so. And by all accounts from that time, he was a devout Muslim, polite, well-mannered.
And his whole purpose in Germany was academic, right?
Entirely.
Yeah.
He was there to study urban planning at the Technical University in Hamburg.
And the first impressions he made on his, his German peers and especially his lecturers, they were key to this whole facade he was building.
Oh, they were initially very impressed by him. The sources note that he wasn't, conspicuously dressed.
Yeah.
He arrived, and I'm quoting here, normally in a blazer.
A blazer, it's such a specific, disarming detail.
It suggests a very conscious effort to just blend in, to integrate into that academic environment.
Right.
His focus, at least on the surface, was on urban development. He's described as interested and eager for guidance.
I find that detail about his studies urban planning just incredibly relevant here.
How so?
Well, he wasn't just studying abstract math. He was studying the physical, systematic construction of society, of cities, of infrastructure.
That's a crucial analytical point the sources invite us to consider.
Do you think that field of study maybe amplified his developing critiques of Western society?
I think it had to. Urban planning forces you to observe and critique how Western societies organize themselves. Housing, transport, governance.
The social issues.
Right. And the sources suggest Atta arrived seeking knowledge, but that knowledge very quickly turned into a systematic critique. The whole Western environment, the culture, the secularism, the social norms, it began to, and the source uses this phrase, increasingly irritate the devout Muslim student.
So it wasn't just a dislike, it became an intellectual friction point that just escalated into this huge ideological conflict.
Exactly. He wasn't just passively disliking his environment. His academic life was giving him the framework to intellectually deconstruct it and then reject it.
So when that irritation hits a critical mass, where does a person like that turn?
They turned to community for affirmation. And for Atta, that community became the Quds Mosque in Hamburg. This is where he finds his like-minded individuals, a network that validates his critique. And crucially, this is where he starts hearing sermons from radical imams that provide the ideological solution to his frustration.
And let's be clear, the sources are very direct that those sermons were not calls for theological debate.
Not at all. They were explicit, inflammatory calls for jihad, for holy war against non-believers. It provided a direct outlet for that escalating irritation.
This transition, it really highlights the critical nature of that local nexus.
It does. The mosque provided the network, the ideology, and the motivation.
No, what's genuinely fascinating and what the sources detail so well is the perspective of the German security agencies during all this. They were watching this place.
They were.
So the sources make it clear there wasn't a blind spot about the existence of radicalism, but more about its operational intent.
Precisely. They recognized the emotion toward jihad. They even noted a sense of departure, that this clique was gearing up for something.
So they knew they had a radical group.
They did. However, the sources identify this massive, fatal blind spot regarding the scale of the threat. Specifically, the threat posed by domestic actors who were planning to operate abroad.
Can you explain the mechanism of that failure? Because for our audience, just saying they missed it isn't enough. Why did their priority system fail here?
Well, the sources suggest that the whole focus of counterterrorism at the time was aimed at stopping groups from launching attacks from Germany or, supporting international terror from afar.
Okay, so a domestic focus.
Right. They didn't fully grasp that the radicalization happening right there in situ among these educated students would translate into planning these incredibly complex multi-site terror attacks in the United States.
Yeah.
They understood the sentiment, but they completely missed the calculated intention and the capability.
So they saw the radicalization as a potential problem, but not a direct, immediate operational threat coming from this highly skilled subset of its participants.
Exactly that. And Atta, who was using the alias El Emir, which means something like the prince or the commander, he was in their intelligence system.
He was on their list.
He appeared there, yes. But he wasn't fully identified, and he certainly wasn't considered a high priority for operational pursuit. They saw him as a radical student, not a strategic military planner.
Wow.
The sources are definitive on this. The specific, dangerous path of Atta and his group was just. It wasn't on their radar as a priority target, despite all the clear ideological signs.
And this local thing, this Hamburg clique, was at the same time plugging itself into this massive global figure.
Right. The sources point to the crucial influence of Osama bin Laden.
And he provides the framework.
He provides the universal ideological framework. Bin Laden, son of a Saudi billionaire, he explicitly viewed the USA as the main enemy of Islam. And this resonated, with a general feeling in many Islamic countries that Western modernity was threatening their values.
So Atta's irritation with Hamburg was just a microcosm of this much larger global resentment.
Perfectly put. And crucially, bin Laden had already proven his operational scale.
We're talking about the U.S. embassy bombings.
In Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, August 1998, over 200 fatalities. These were not small incidents. They were organized, complex, international terror operations.
And that scale is what cemented bin Laden's status as a serious global actor.
And for Atta and his clique, an essential role model. So despite maintaining his academic life, Atta was now a principal figure in the local Islamist scene.
And the sources suggest he was already plotting, coordinating, leading his group, all while keeping up the facade of the diligent urban planning student.
And this successful dual life, this paradox, is the key to all his later operational success.
So the stage is set. He has the ideology, the local network, the global role model, and the perfect cover of academia.
He just needs one last thing.
The diploma. The thing that legitimizes his travel and his final absence.
And the timing on this shift is just perfect. Atta successfully completes his diploma exam in the summer of 1999.
With good grades, the sources note.
With good grades. He finishes his studies, gets the qualification he came for. And this achievement, it gives him this potent final piece of leverage and, more importantly, a perfect exit strategy.
And the sources detail how he used this academic success immediately for deception. He goes to visit his family in Egypt in October of '99.
And his family, understandably proud of their educated son, they celebrate his diploma. And they immediately move to the next expected step.
Finding him a bride.
Exactly. Organizing a bride for him, fulfilling that typical expectation for a young man of his standing.
And this is where the deception, the feint, or fante as the source material pointedly calls it, really comes into play. What was the exact lie he told his family?
Well, he agreed to the marriage. He gave the impression that he was committed to his future life, but then he created this pressing professional pretext for his immediate return to Hamburg.
Which was?
He told them he needed to go back to Germany first to pursue his doctorate, his PhD.
A complete fabrication.
Utterly. His academic ambitions had been completely replaced by operational ones.
So the PhD was just cover. Where did he actually go instead of back to the university?
Straight to Afghanistan.
Wow.
He went directly to an al-Qaeda training camp. This wasn't just a quick visit. This was a full commitment. He joined hundreds of other young men being trained as terrorists, all of them looking for a home in Islam and a place in what they saw as the Holy War.
There's proof of this?
Oh, yes. The sources confirm the depth of his commitment. They note a video from January 2000 that shows Atta standing right alongside his Hamburg classmate, Ziad Jarrah, already deeply entrenched in that camp.
Okay, this brings us to the moment where the global terror network realizes exactly what they have in this Hamburg group.
Yes.
This is the crucial personnel gap that, according to the sources, saved the 9/11 plot.
This is, I think, the most astonishing detail the sources provide. Al-Qaeda was in operational distress. They were struggling intensely, almost fatally, to launch their airplane operation. They had brilliant ideologues, they had motivated fighters, but they lacked the specific skills they needed to turn passenger jets into sophisticated missiles.
What exactly were the men already in the camps lacking? What were these skills?
Western fluency and technical literacy. The sources are very specific. The existing recruits didn't speak English well enough to navigate U.S. flight schools or aviation communication.
Okay, that makes sense.
And they had never lived in the West. That meant they couldn't get U.S. visas, they couldn't open bank accounts, they couldn't just blend into American society without immediately raising suspicion. They just lacked the cultural know-how and the technical proficiency.
So they couldn't pull it off.
The analysis says they were reportedly about to call the entire operation off for lack of skilled personnel.
And then Atta, Jarrah, and the others arrive, educated, English-speaking, technically proficient graduates with clean travel histories. It wasn't just a recruitment.
It was a logistical miracle for bin Laden. The sources use profound language here. They describe their arrival as a dream and like an answered prayer.
Because they had what the others didn't.
Atta and the Hamburg group knew the West intimately. They spoke multiple languages. They had a technical proficiency that the existing al-Qaeda operatives simply did not have. Their years spent integrating into polite German society provided them with the perfect lethal skill set.
That is the ultimate terrible irony. The very academic integration that Atta used as a facade was the exact skill set that made the attack on the West possible. His ability to navigate the boring, bureaucratic world of the West made him exponentially more dangerous than a hardened mountain fighter.
Absolutely. And bin Laden saw this irreplaceable value immediately.
So what did he do?
The sources detail how bin Laden personally invited Atta and Jarrah to the Ramadan festival at his house. He was essentially celebrating their status. He declared them to be the chosen ones for a major martyr mission.
And in that moment, Atta transforms.
He goes from being a radical student leader to an international operational commander. Just like that.
And he was the leader of the Hamburg group, so he effectively pulled his friends into this specific mission with him.
He did.
But what was the ultimate non-religious driver for him? What was the psychological hook that made him commit so completely?
The sources suggest it goes beyond just ideology. They point to a powerful, very human drive. Atta was motivated by a desire for a place in history.
He wanted to leave a mark.
A monumental, indelible mark on the world. And al-Qaeda offered him exactly that, the chance to write history.
You know, that desire for a place in history connects so perfectly back to his abandoned PhD path.
How do you mean?
He wanted a legacy. Whether it was through urban development theory or global terrorism, the goal was significance.
That's a fascinating point. It speaks to this massive merging of ego, a desperate need for significance with this ideological framework. And the sources are chillingly clear on the calculus.
All they had to do to achieve this historical significance was die.
And he embraced that nihilistic self-sacrifice completely. He went from seeking an academic legacy to seeking a historical martyrdom that would destroy the very symbols he came to despise. The commitment was now total.
Okay, so the next phase, it's about transforming their existing skills into deadly, specific operational skills. The training has to begin quickly.
That's right. Atta and Ziad Jarrah, they traveled together to the U.S., specifically to Florida.
And they enroll in flight schools.
To receive actual pilot training. And this wasn't just learning to navigate. They were learning to operate these complex aircraft with the sole intent of turning them into guided missiles.
And that stage requires incredible focus. It's one thing to read about it, but another to actually enroll and fund and maintain a rigorous training program for over a year.
All while planning mass murder.
Yeah.
By the summer of 2001, the sources confirm Atta, Jara, and their accomplices were fully ready. They had assimilated into American life just long enough to get the skills and maintain their cover. The logistical phase now shifts to final deployment.
And the final tickets, the point of no return, are booked starting in late August. What did the structure of the attack look like logistically?
The structure was highly precise and devastatingly efficient. 4 teams organized to simultaneously hijack 4 separate passenger planes.
And Atta was assigned to American Airlines Flight 11.
From Boston to Los Angeles. But the sources note his journey actually began in Portland on the morning of September 11th, where he connected to Boston.
And the very last available images we have of Mohammed Atta were taken during the security check at the airport that morning.
A chilling detail. Just a final mundane interaction with a security apparatus he was about to weaponize.
And he wasn't alone.
No. Atta was the operational leader of the team on Flight 11. The sources specified that 4 other terrorists had tickets booked with him, and they were all intentionally positioned in first class.
Strategic seating.
Absolutely. Designed for immediate, rapid access to the cockpit.
And the moment the operational phase began is recorded precisely by the sources, 8:12 a.m.
That's when the assault on Flight 11 starts. The forces refer to 2 fighters who stormed the cockpit.
And their weapon of choice. It says so much about pre-9/11 security.
Box cutters. Teppich Messern.
We have to pause on that detail. The box cutter. It emphasizes how incredibly low-tech the tool was, yet how effective it was at creating lethal chaos in a high-tech environment.
Precisely. In 2001, security protocol was built around looking for explosives and firearms. A simple box cutter was enough to overwhelm an unarmed flight crew and capitalize on total surprise.
And Atta himself, he didn't immediately participate in the takeover.
No, he only became active after the crew was overwhelmed. He then took over the controls as the designated, highly trained pilot and began guiding the plane toward its destination.
We also get this brief, terrible insight into his mind through his written testament, which the sources cite.
We do.
What does the language he chose reveal?
The language is purely centered on martyring himself for what he saw as the true faith.
Yeah.
He wrote, "Those who keep watch over my corpse must remember Allah and pray that I come to the angels." And later, "From dust you came, to dust you shall return. Everyone should say that I died in the true faith." This isn't the language of a desperate, cornered man. This is someone who believes he is successfully completing a divine contract.
And what about his view of the innocent victims on the plane and in the towers? The sources are explicit about this.
The analysis concludes that the thousands of people he was about to kill were either guilty in his eyes, symbols of the hated West, or they were just means to an end.
A complete dehumanization.
Complete. His goal was destruction and historical impact. The destruction was the goal, and the people were simply irrelevant to the success of his mission.
The flight was now a weapon.
And the initial chaos on Flight 11 immediately triggered an alert. The sources confirmed that a flight attendant managed to alert the airline's central office from the tail of the plane.
A crucial, immediate warning that a hijacking was underway.
Yes, but that communication clashed with decades of aviation security norms.
Right. The old advice was never to resist.
Absolutely. Traditionally, security training advised passengers and crew not to resist, because hijackers usually wanted ransom or political demands.
Yeah.
Resistance meant guaranteed death.
And bringing down the plane was it wasn't in the operational handbook.
Not at all. And this pre-9/11 mindset was exploited perfectly by Attas' team.
So Attas is at the controls, directing the hijacked plane toward New York. The sources mention he used a simple, obvious navigation aid.
He used the Hudson River. Visually, it provided an unmistakable guide straight toward that massive, iconic target.
Yeah.
The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center.
Which, for the Islamists, was the ultimate symbol.
The sources define it as representing the hated capitalist West.
And in a chilling final moment of operational control, Atta even made a broadcast to the passengers.
He did. That broadcast was intended for air traffic control, but it was recorded. It was this message of command, heard by everyone on board, reinforcing their complete dominance and the certainty of their actions.
The first strike happened at 8:46 a.m. Atta reached his final destination. American Airlines Flight 11 hits the North Tower.
And the plan just unfolds with this frightening speed and coordination. Less than 20 minutes later, at 9:02 a.m., a second plane crashes into the South Tower of the WTC.
A strategic 1-2 punch at the financial heart of the country.
Exactly. And the horror wasn't contained to New York. Half an hour later, the third plane struck the Pentagon in Washington,
Hitting the military center of the United States.
Now, what the sources provide next is this unique, almost cinematic glimpse into the operations headquarters in Afghanistan, focusing on Osama bin Laden himself.
And the planning was so compartmentalized, right?
So much so that only bin Laden knew the full scope of what was happening.
And anticipating the U.S. reaction, bin Laden and his men had retreated to the mountains beforehand. How did they even get the news?
They were completely reliant on external signals. They had a portable TV that got no signal, so they were just listening intensely to the radio.
Okay.
And the sources describe this unforgettable, silent communication system that bin Laden used to signal success.
Let's linger on that image of the silent shilling scorecard. What happened when the first plane hit?
When the news of the first plane hitting the tower came over the radio, everyone around bin Laden just erupted in cheers.
But not bin Laden.
No. He responded with absolute control and silence. He raised one finger.
One finger.
To signify that this was only the first blow. It was an affirmation, but also a command to wait for the larger multi-strike confirmation.
A moment later, the radio confirms the second plane, the South Tower. What was his signal then?
He raised the second finger, and after the Pentagon attack was confirmed, he raised the third finger.
Wow, it's such a powerful, wordless gesture.
It underscored the profound strategic scope of the attack, targeting finance, then the military. It wasn't random. It was highly coordinated symbolic destruction.
Which raises the question, if the plan had succeeded completely, what was the intended meaning of the fourth finger?
The sources state definitively that the fourth finger would have been for the capital.
The seat of Congress.
The seat of Parliament, the functional democratic heart of American government. This confirms the intention was to decapitate the four pillars of American power: economic, military, political, and symbolic, all at the same time.
But the fourth plane, United 93, never reached Washington.
No.
And this is the story of profound and crucial resistance led by the passengers themselves.
That plane, piloted by Atta's friend, Ziad Jarrah, was the one likely destined for the capital.
Yeah.
But thanks to those warning calls from the ground, detailing how the other planes were being used as missiles.
The passengers realized what was happening.
They did. And they made the heroic decision to fight back. They attempted to storm the cockpit, realizing their only chance of survival and of preventing further carnage was to neutralize the pilots.
And Jarrah desperately tried to stop them.
He attempted to deter them with risky flying maneuvers, trying to throw them off balance and keep control of the aircraft. But the confrontation reached a critical physical stage.
And the plane ultimately crashed in a field in Pennsylvania.
The ultimate cost was the lives of everyone on board. But their actions successfully thwarted the final strategic element of bin Laden's master plan.
That sacrifice meant the capital was spared. The fourth symbolic strike was prevented.
It was. The sources remind us that the ultimate toll of the day was just catastrophic. Nearly 3,000 people died in the attacks, representing 90 different nations.
In the immediate aftermath, amid all that chaos, the focus of global intelligence shifted instantly to identifying the attackers. And the sources reveal that their identity was established with just remarkable speed.
Atta's identification was rapid and definitive. It was largely due to the meticulous paper trail that he and his accomplices left behind.
How so?
Well, he was identified as the first death pilot through the passenger list, which was immediately cross-referenced, and this quickly led investigators right to the flight school in Florida.
And the sources note his driver's license photo was circulated globally almost immediately. Suddenly, the face of that polite student in the blazer was irrevocably linked to this horrific act.
And the investigation instantly traced him back to his operational base in Germany. Just one day after the attacks, police were searching Atta's former apartment on Marienstrasse in Hamburg.
So the link between the quiet student life, the radical clique, and the operational command structure was definitively confirmed within 24 hours.
It was. And meanwhile, the focus shifted to Egypt, where his family still believed he was pursuing a PhD.
And reporters swarmed the high-rise building in Cairo where his parents lived.
Atta's father, the lawyer, reacted with an absolute and very public denial. He fiercely insisted his son was not political, pointing again and again to his academic focus, saying he had only focused on his studies.
So the father's core argument was anchored in this profound cognitive dissonance. The polished, educated son he knew could not possibly be this global monster.
And his denial quickly escalated into a complete rejection of the facts, transforming the tragedy into a conspiracy theory.
Right, he argued that the accusations were constructed by Americans based on prejudices against Arabs. He tried to frame his son as an innocent victim of Western bias.
He did. And the sources highlight the depth of this denial by detailing the most shocking claim the father made to support his son's innocence.
Which was the claim that he had spoken with his son after the attack.
Yes. He insisted that he had spoken with his son in Hamburg after the attacks had taken place. He was trying to manufacture an alibi that was, of course, physically and factually impossible.
As Atta died when Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower.
Right. It just illustrates the extent to which the family felt compelled to construct an alternative reality.
And the sources highlight the tragic, lasting impact of this denial. It became a psychological necessity for the family for years afterward.
The analysis suggests that years later, Atta's parents still refused to believe his guilt. The pain of acceptance was just too great. The only way they could preserve the memory of the polite, successful son they had raised, and thus remain proud of him, was to utterly reject the reality of the terrorist operative.
So the father's denial became this final, painful layer of the paradox Atta created, forcing his own family into a desperate act of historical revisionism just to survive the legacy he left behind. This deep dive, grounded entirely in the source material, it truly lays out a chilling, clear trajectory. We started by exploring the student in Hamburg, whose academic life was this deceptive shield.
Right.
And we tracked his transformation into the hardened, lethal operative who achieved his terrible goal of seizing a place in history. It's a narrative defined by calculated deception and total ideological commitment.
And if we synthesize the core aha moment for you, the listener, it is the sheer utility of the Hamburg group that defines the operation.
Explain that.
The sources make it clear that the specific skills they possessed, language fluency, technical proficiency, cultural navigation, they weren't secondary. They were the sine qua non of the 9/11 plot.
The essential ingredient.
Their arrival turned them from a fringe group into what was literally described as an answered prayer for a major strategic operation. Without Atta and his peers' ability to get a PhD facade, U.S. visas, and pilot licenses, the analysis suggests this specific devastating plot might have been abandoned entirely.
And that is the essential takeaway for the learner. This deep dive shows us how sophisticated radicalization can not only coexist with a seemingly normal life, getting good grades, having clean travel documents, even agreeing to a marriage, but it can actually leverage that normalcy.
Yes.
Atta's successful facade made the threat functionally invisible until the final catastrophic act.
And this analysis leaves us with a profound question that the sources themselves explicitly prompt the listener to consider. And it's a necessary reflection as we close this difficult discussion.
What do they ask?
They ask, what do you think turns a person into a terrorist and mass murderer, and how can this be prevented? It prompts us to consider the powerful role that environment, ideology, the desire for significance, and the absence of critical thinking or external control can play when faced with the lure of historical purpose, however destructive. It asks us to recognize those subtle intersections between ambition and nihilism.